Welcome to Musica Virtuale, a season online, presented by Gallery Concerts. Today we welcome back clarinetist Thomas Carroll for a tour through his workshop and a premiere recording of Beethoven's First Symphony, performed entirely by Thomas himself. And now, your host for the evening, Gallery Concerts Artistic Director, Nathan Whittaker.
Hello, I'm Nathan Whittaker, the Artistic Director of Gallery Concerts. I would like to welcome you to the first episode of Musica Virtuale. This season, we will be presenting 6 online events streaming here on the Gallery Concerts YouTube channel. But first, a few housekeeping issues. This is intended as an interactive experience, which means that you, yes you, can and should be a part. The live chat is on the screen. Please write any questions or friendly comments that you might have for Thomas there. After we see the world premiere of Thomas's arrangement of Beethoven's First Symphony, I will direct many of those questions to Thomas. So fire away. Second, please take a moment to visit galleryconcerts.org for a PDF of tonight's program, complete with Thomas's bio and program notes. And while you are there, you could consider becoming a donor to Gallery Concerts this season. Finally, please subscribe to the Gallery Concerts YouTube channel. Not only will it make it easier for you to access our content, it also helps us to reach a wider audience and will unlock features that will make this experience even better. Tonight, I am thrilled to announce we are joined by Thomas Carroll, who not only is an extraordinary clarinetist and overall musician, but also a fabulous builder of instruments as well. Hi, Thomas. How are you doing today?
Hi, Nathan. It's great to be back. I'm doing great.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're really excited to have you for the maiden voyage of this series. And one of the things that we wanted to explore in this online setup is a way that we can get a closer look. You know, that's one of the advantages of these online interactions, is that we can get really up close and personal, all up in your business. And one of your businesses is the building of instruments. I think it would be really interesting to hear a little bit about how you build your period clarinets.
Sure. Well, to begin with, building period clarinets or any sort of instrument usually starts from a place of necessity. And for me, the necessity was to have many instruments available for me to perform on without having to wait 3 to 5 years for other luthiers to make them for me. And so, you know, I grew up as a child of the 90s. Legos and Connects and Erector set were very much a part of my playtime. And so at an early age, I kind of developed a knack for being able to look at pictures of things and figure out how to make them work, or figure out how to take the parts that I had and build something that would work. And so I kind of apply that same strategy to making my instruments, whether it's going into a museum and measuring an original and then going to the workshop and trying to replicate it as close as I can, or if it's measuring a whole bunch of surviving instruments from the same maker, some of which may have been played, some of which may have been discarded, and trying to find what the original dimensions might have been based on all of these subtle differences in the surviving instruments. So all my instruments kind of start like this. And so this is a cross section of a boxwood log. I use boxwood for the bodies of my instruments, and ebony or African blackwood for the mouthpieces. And in a couple instances, I also use maple for some of the larger pieces as well. But this is a cross section of a boxwood log, and you'll notice that I have some areas marked out on it. This area right in the middle here, this heartwood area, is generally an area that we try to avoid. It's the structurally weakest part of the tree. Cracks usually go directly through it, which means that, if you don't want your instrument to crack, you sort of avoid that area and a little bit of the surrounding area. So this particular piece of wood was from a log that I had to discard a large portion of before I could get to something that was usable. The squares on this side might be something that I could use for, say, the size of a barrel, leaving in extra wood to turn away to make sure that I had enough room to work with to get to the final dimension. So here's a larger piece, and then here something a little smaller. And then this area in the giant circle is something that I might use for a clarinet bell. And so this is actually a blank for a bell. And so when I go about making an instrument, the first thing I do is quarter saw the logs and try to figure out where the instrument pieces are going to come from, and trying to find places in the log that are completely free from cracks, from splits, as much as possible from knots, although a lot of those are underneath the surface. So the next step is to take a piece like this, which is taken from the cross section of a log, and to drill a pilot hole through it after turning it round on the lathe. And this pilot hole will allow the wood to dry out fairly evenly. We want to reduce the moisture content in the wood as much as possible before putting in the final interior bore and then putting it between centers on the lathe to do the exterior turning work. And the reason for this is because we want the wood to be in as stable a condition as possible, to prepare it for the stresses of being on the lathe, and also the repeated stress of having hot, warm air blown through it as a woodwind instrument. It also gives us an idea of what the instrument is going to sound like. We generally look for wood that has a nice natural resonance to it, and if the wood is dry enough, you can usually get a decent ring out of it if you knock your finger or a hammer gently on the wood to sort of see what the pitch is. So that's what this step is: putting a pilot hole through the piece of wood, and then letting it sit to age the wood for up to a year between steps. So the next step is to put the interior bore of the instrument into the piece. And so this piece is a bell. So the exterior shape of the clarinet bell has a nice, gentle, semi-parabolic taper, and that shape is actually replicated on the inside of the bell as well. And so you can see here, there's a slope that starts fairly narrow and then tapers as it goes out to the outer edge of the bell. And so I've built myself a series of reamers, and I do the last bit of turning freely by hand while the workpiece is spinning in the lathe. And in this way, I can sort of accurately reproduce the taper of the bells. And each instrument, unfortunately, has its own different taper for the beginning of the bell, which means I've had to make quite a few different reamers to replicate that taper. In terms of the longer pieces for the clarinet, I'm lucky in that the clarinet is a cylindrical instrument until you get to the taper leading into the bell, whereas instruments like the flute or the oboe or the bassoon are all conical tapers. The oboe and bassoon start with a very small taper and then expand as you go down, and the flute is the opposite, with a wide bore that tapers more closed as you go down the length of the instrument. The clarinet is just a straight shot. So a lot of these instruments, I have one long body reamer that I can use for all of the pieces of the instrument, except for that final taper in the bell. So that is fairly lucky for me as a clarinet maker. So the next step after putting the interior taper or the interior bore into a piece is to put it between centers on the lathe and turn it to the final exterior dimensions. And so this is a finished clarinet bell. This is one from my personal instrument that I play most of my performances on. And you can see that it's got that nice finished bell taper that's also the same as the shape for the outside. And you'll notice that there are a couple differences from this piece of wood to the tree that it came from. And one of those differences is the stain. I use a nitric acid stain on the finished instruments. Not only does this make sure that the wood all is a uniform color before I ship the instruments out, because sometimes if a piece of boxwood isn't cooperating, I might have to substitute in another piece of boxwood or remake a joint. And sometimes the boxwood doesn't stain the same way if you just use oil. So using an acid stain means that you can control the color. And the other thing is that the acid stain will caramelize the sugars that are present in the wood on the outside, which means that you're actually building up a layer of protection against humidity on the outside of the instrument, which is good to protect against cracking and to some extent against changes in humidity and temperature that we frequently have to go through, especially as traveling musicians. The other thing you might notice about this one is the ring here. On an original instrument, this would have been made out of ivory. On my instruments, I use a synthetic ivory substitute. I have a couple chemists, one in France and one company in China that make imitation ivory that replicates the grain pattern of elephant ivory. So to the naked eye, it looks the same or very close to the real thing. Under an ultraviolet light, obviously the lattice work doesn't show up, and so you can very easily tell that it's an imitation. But on stage and from the audience, it looks very much like regular ivory, and it has roughly the same density, which means that the working properties are also the same, so that's a plus. In terms of the key work on these instruments, the keys start out as being sheets of brass that are hammered into the proper shape. And so this is just a key from a regular C clarinet, and you can see there's a small hole through it. And all that's holding it to the wood is just a pin, and it just spins on the pin. And the pin is held in place in the wood with simple friction, which means that the pins will not fall out, but they're also easy enough to remove, so that if I were to change a pad during intermission or between concerts, I wouldn't have a problem taking the key off, taking the pad off, and then replacing it. The mouthpieces for the instruments that I build are made out of either an ebony or a grenadilla African blackwood, depending on what the customer likes. I prefer mouthpieces out of grenadilla because I think for the way I play, they have the best response, but other customers have responded to ebony as a preferential wood. And so the ebony starts its life out like this. I get it in billet form or in turning square form with the ends waxed so that the humidity can be controlled as it leaves the instrument and reduce the risk of end checking. I turn the mouthpiece blanks down on the lathe and pre-bore them with the proper internal dimensions so that they look something like this. So this is a finished blank. So from here to the end, it's a completely solid piece of wood. But from here all the way to the end of this tenon, the interior bore is already drilled and reamed into the wood. So after that, all I have to do is reduce it to something like this. And so this is a finished mouthpiece. And so you can see to do that, it's a lot of handwork. It's a lot of carving out the interior of this area, which is called the window, and flattening this area here, which is called the table. And then profiling this beak area right here so that it fits perfectly in the mouth. And then perhaps my favorite part of making mouthpieces, applying the facing, which is this very last about 2 centimeters or so of the table, where there's a gentle slope to open so that that creates the space that the reed vibrates. And to do this, I have a series of gauges ranging from 15 thousandths of an inch to about 39 thousandths of an inch that I use to apply the facing. So that's sort of a brief overview of how I approach building my instruments. Other instrument makers have their own sort of tricks and ways of doing things, but this is the method that I've used from the very beginning, and it's the one that's yielded the best results for me.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Thank you for that in-depth look. Um, Tonight we're going to hear some of those instruments in an arrangement that this is the world premiere of Beethoven's First Symphony. So my question is, what inspired you to arrange this beloved work for clarinet ensemble?
Well, I think just like many of my colleagues, when the pandemic shutdowns hit the United States and all of our concert seasons got taken away like that, I think a lot of us were kind of lost as to how to go on as performing musicians. And so for me, I decided that I was going to explore arranging works for multiple clarinets using as many of the instruments that I have in my collection as possible. And so I started with numerous arrangements of Mozart overtures for trios of basset horns, and I went far forward into the 19th century with some Wagner and some and then as far forward as the early 20th century with Prokofiev. And, in doing all of this, I knew that I wanted to do something by Beethoven because this is a Beethoven year. This is the 250th anniversary of his birth. And I wasn't quite sure what to do. And I thought about the first concerts that I did as a professional period instrument clarinetist, and they almost always involved Beethoven's First Symphony. And I think that's because Beethoven's First Symphony is a very accessible piece for Baroque orchestras that are branching out into the late classical repertory for the first time. And so this seemed like a good reason to at least consider the piece. And then I also remembered that I had been scheduled to play Beethoven's First Symphony 3 times during this past season. And I did 2 of those performances, and then the final one got canceled because of the pandemic. That was the one in Vancouver that you and I were supposed to play on together, Nathan.
Yeah, that was going to be fun. Oh well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sort of decided to arrange the Beethoven First Symphony, and so my first step was to get a copy of the score and commit as much of it to memory as possible, and reimagine what the score would sound like arranged for 5 clarinet type instruments. And I settled on 3 clarinets in C and 2 basset horns in F, which fit mostly within the range of what the symphony required of the players. And so I went through with numerous colored highlighters and highlighted pretty much every bar of the score to show how I wanted the music to be divided up between the multiple parts. And Nathan, I think we have a page. Yeah, there it is. So you can see I've sort of, this is just the first page of the first movement. I've gone and I've highlighted every single bar, and you can see the first oboe part starts with the clarinet 1, and then it drops down to the first violin to take the lead voice there. And so all of the other voices redistribute themselves accordingly on every page of the symphony. And then after that, it was just trial and error, writing out the arrangement, recording test tracks to see if I liked how everything blended, and finally coming up with something that I was really happy with, and then disappearing into my bedroom recording studio and hitting the red button.
That sounds like the process. Well, I'm excited to hear it. Without further ado, I'm excited to announce the world premiere of Beethoven's First Symphony, arranged for clarinet choir by Thomas Carroll. And in this performance, we have it being performed by Thomas Carroll, Thomas Carroll, Thomas Carroll, Thomas Carroll, and on basset horn, Thomas Carroll. Wow, what an incredible performance. Um, this pandemic has been uh, many things, but one is it's really forced so many of us to be more creative than we ever thought we would ever need to be. And out of all the things I've seen over the last few months, this really comes right to the top as far as
Thank you.
this level of creativity. So congratulations,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
So I think now is the time to bring in a few of our questions. For those of you out there who would like to ask Thomas something, please feel free to type it in the chat. Let's start with this one. This is fantastic. How did you record this? Do you have cloning technology or a time machine, perhaps?
No time machine. I don't know Doc Brown, and Jurassic Park scientists haven't really come up with a way to clone humans yet, just dinosaurs. Um, so what I did for this is I actually recorded a silent conductor video of myself just conducting, mainly beating time, but also putting a little bit of the expression into the conducting video. And I put that conducting video on my iPad along with basically cue cards with clips of the sheet music for each part on it. Not the entire piece, but just clips, just motives, things that I wouldn't necessarily trust myself to remember if I was going to record 5 of these things in a row on 5 different parts. And I set that out of frame so that the video camera can't see it. And I could control the start and stop playback in between the movements with a foot pedal. And I would just look at the screen, watch myself conduct, and then play a performance of the piece from there, and then take a little bit of a break, swab out my instrument, move on to the next part, and do the same thing again, and then for the subsequent 3 parts as well. So recording all 5 parts back to back with only about a 5-minute break or so in between takes close to 3 hours, and to do it with no mistakes takes many, many more hours than that, and a lot of practicing behind the scenes and making recording backing tracks of the other parts so that I can play along with them as I practice and learn the parts and teach myself to memorize all the parts as I go along.
Yeah, what a huge project. Absolutely. Oh, Martha. Hi, Martha. It's lovely to at least see your name. She she says you're identical quintuplets. So clever. Could you do this with Mahler 8? Wow, that would be quite the undertaking.
Well, I'd need 995 more of me to do that, and I'd need to teach myself to sing soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and also children's choir as well.
You'd be in
And I'm
very
pretty sure
small boxes. Very small
yeah,
boxes.
I'm pretty sure I would also crash my computer trying to edit that all together. But it's interesting that you mentioned Mahler. One of the first arrangements that I did was actually a clarinet quartet uh, rendition of the the last movement of Mahler's Fourth Symphony. And that was actually one of the ones that I'd wanted to do from the beginning. And so I'm glad that I got to do that. I ended up using late 19th century German clarinets and then a Viennese bass clarinet from roughly around 1870. So it's a little early for Mahler, but it worked out fairly well.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's see. Oh, this is a great one. Are you considering publishing this?
Actually, the I've just started putting my arrangements up on my website, carrollclarinet.com. There's now a tab on my website for sheet music. Right now, just my Mozart transcriptions are up there, but in the coming weeks, the Beethoven, Mahler, Prokofiev, Wagner, Strauss, and a few of the other ones that I've done will also be up there as well.
Wow, that's very cool. Let's see. What kind of ligatures are used on early clarinets, and are the joints corked?
So this is the ligature that I use, and it's just a piece of string. This is just a 2 millimeter thick piece of string, and to tie on the reed, it's actually just a slip knot. So you put the reed where you want it on the mouthpiece, and then you hold the string in place with your thumb, and there are grooves that I've put into the mouthpieces so that the string doesn't slip. And so you just tightly wind that through, make a loop, and then pull it through the end. And now the mouthpiece is secure, and the reed isn't gonna come loose. And as you can see on this, it's just a waxed piece of thread um, wrapped around the tenon. That was the historical way to wrap tenons up until the mid 19th century. And the reason for that is because boxwood especially tends to warp and tends to swell and contract with changes in humidity and pressure and temperature. And so in order to prevent the cork, which was sort of a more durable thing from strangling the joint, it was easier to use waxed cotton thread that, if the joint swelled, would just break, and then you just take it off and reapply it.
Very cool. Very cool. How long have you been playing the clarinet?
I started in fourth grade, and it's been pretty much my best friend ever since. I've just gone from there. And I started on modern clarinet, just like most people do. And I didn't really discover the period instrument side of performing on clarinet until I was an undergrad at Oberlin Conservatory, and I sort of discovered it on my own. My teacher gave me a little bit of guidance. I spent winter term in the UK studying with Alan Hacker, who was one of the premier performers on early clarinet at the beginning of the early instrument movement. And I've pretty much been primarily a performer on early clarinet ever since. After Oberlin, I went to Indiana University and then to the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague, and spent 4 years working with Eric Oprich, who was my primary mentor, both in performing on early clarinets and in giving me guidance in building them. And it's been a wild ride, and I've been thankful for every single moment of it.
Well, we're very thankful that you are doing this and have enjoyed every moment of it. As a bonus for us, because we get to hear more of you. I've read one thing that is more true than anything I've read all day, which is simply this: that Thomas is a boss. I would love for you to, for everyone who agrees that you are a boss, where can we go to learn more about you and follow all of your goings on?
So I have a presence on Facebook, just my regular Facebook profile. I'm on Instagram and YouTube under the usernames Clary Melonet, and then my website carrollclarinet.com has more information about the instruments I build. As I said before, the arrangements are published through there. There are some different concert videos that aren't available on YouTube. And there's more information about the kind of work that I do in terms of research and designing these instruments.
Well, Thomas, it has been such a pleasure to spend this hour with you. Thank you so much for being here with Gallery Concerts this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on. This has been great. I'm so glad that Gallery Concerts is putting this together.
We're excited to do this and excited to have you. And many thanks to all of you out in cyberspace for spending part of your day with us. Before we depart, I would like to bring your attention to the remaining events this season. In January, Caroline Nicolas joins us to explore the viola da gamba's evolution from the lute, especially in its use of tablature. In February, the one and only Marc Destrubé invites us into his home to discuss the importance of music and art during this time and share the music of Bieber, Balzer, and Bach. In March, keyboard virtuoso Jonathan Oddie takes us on a journey into musical variation with the music of Mozart and Beethoven. Gallery Concerts founder Jillon Stoppels-Dupree joins the show in April to give us a view from inside the harpsichord. And finally, in May, I will discuss the evolution of the cello from an accompaniment instrument to featured soloist. I hope you will be able to join us again for those events. Please visit galleryconcerts.org for more information on the season, as well as to donate and financially support Gallery Concerts. We would like to wish you a delightful Thanksgiving, a safe holiday season, and a prosperous new year. May 2021 be, well, not 2020. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you next time.